Good evening. Thank you for joining. I wanted to, it's 6 o'clock, so I know it's late. I appreciate you all being here. We've got quite a few people that are coming on again. This is my third time today for doing this webinar, and it's been very rewarding each time. I hope you all find some great information out of it, and that's really the whole idea. Is to get some good information about how the COVID-19 virus is impacting the real estate market right now. So I'm going to try something a little bit different. Because this is my first webinar that I've ever done, I was afraid or didn't understand or didn't know how to have people ask questions during it. And what I discovered over the last two is, although impactful and we had a lot of fun and I've got good comments afterwards, is maybe if somebody could, if there's a really burning question that you have, or maybe at the end, I think there's a button that you guys can raise your hand and ask to speak. If we can, I'd like to leave as many questions until the end, if possible. So that way we can get through the presentation, be respectful of everyone's time and so forth. And but if you have a burning question or something just pops up and you can't wait, if you're ADD like me, just raise your hand and see if I can answer your question at that time, or if I can't, I'll pause it and come back to it as soon as I can. So this is a new feature I'm trying in the evening session tonight. So if you'll just bear with me, this has been a fun and eye-opening experience today. And I think we're a little bit past 6, so to be respectful of everyone's time, people can, other people can come in, but let's go ahead and get started. And I want to begin by talking about what this is. This is just an informational webinar about, again, how the coronavirus is affecting the Dayton housing market. And it's not my intention to have an opinion about the coronavirus. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an accountant. I am a professional real estate agent. The information that I'm bringing to you, there's a disclaimer at the bottom. Please feel free to read that. This is all brought to you in good faith, and everything is sourced on every slide. However, this is, information and opinions from the data that I've done the research on and want to bring to you, so that if you are thinking about buying or selling anytime in the next, 9 months and during the 2020 year, hopefully it'll help you make some decisions one way or the other. So with that, introduction, I'm Denise Swick. Some of you on this webinar have met me before, some of you have not. Thank you all for joining. But who is this lady and how is she qualified to talk to me about, how the housing market is being affected? Well, I'll go into that in just a second, but these are the 6 topics that we're going to be covering so that you'll get a clear vision of how I am qualified to tell you that. I've been selling real estate in the Dayton area, northern Cincinnati market for a little over 3 decades. When I started selling, we were at double-digit interest rates. We were using creative financing like assumptions and assumable mortgages and land contracts, and so you really don't even hear about anymore. Into the early 2000s, or 2 recessions in the 90s, and then the early 2000s, where the Dayton, Ohio market had its own crash before the country crashed in 2008, from Delphi, GM, Meade, and NCR pulling out all of their factories and their headquarters out of our area, causing our economy to nearly go into collapse. Then followed by that, or right on the heels of that, we weren't recovered, and we went directly into the Great Recession of 2008, where there were massive foreclosures and short sales and all that kind of stuff. And I'll talk in a minute about how we learned from that and how hopefully this time is not like that time, although there are a lot of similarities. Then we go directly into the good times that we've been experiencing over the last 3 to 4 years, and the boom market, so to speak, in the Dayton area, all of a sudden to come to almost a slamming stop in early March, where it felt like a nanosecond. We were selling lots of real estate one day, and the next day it's like, oh, holy crap, I can't go out of my house, So that's kind of where people are right now is what do we do and how do we do that and how is it affecting it? So through all of those markets, I've consistently sold real estate. There's always buyers buying and sellers selling, and we'll go to that in a minute as well. So hopefully this will shed a lot of light on that and you can understand my experience, therefore my willingness to share. So this is kind of cool. This is a graph of how the showings were on the listings in the Miami Valley, or the Dayton market, prior to the pandemic and the shelter-in-place mandate. So as the first week of March, we were up 40% over the time period before that, right? So our showings were up 40%, and what that means is that there were 40% more buyers than the year before looking at homes, which it was a really strong market. Like I said in February that the spring market had already started in February, and this graph depicts that quite well. Then as of March 12th, the first full week of March, we were high. We were on cloud 10, like moving forward and getting things done. And then we went into the first beginnings of the COVID virus, right? And we were like, oh my God, what's happening? So dead center on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, St. Patrick's Day. It dramatically decreased, and showings dropped 11% on March 17th. So from the 16th to the 22nd was the real uncertainty part of our market. Like we were, what are we going to do? Are they going to make a shelter in place? Are we going to be able to sell real estate? What's happening? And quite frankly, all states are different. So this is only pertaining to Ohio. But you guys, there are some states out there that have not been able to, real estate wasn't considered essential and still isn't considered essential, and they've not been able to show houses, sell houses, move anything, and it's really quite tragic. So we, 322 showings had dropped by 36 to 38%. So again, we're at an all-time high. Then, the shelter in place goes into effect on the 20th, 22nd, and showings drop off by almost as much as they were high. It's also varied by price range. So at that time, from $300,000 to $500,000 market, $500,000 market dropped off about 36%. Over 500,000 was dramatic. It dropped between 50 and 60%. And the market under 300 wasn't affected at least that time as much, but you'll see over the next 5 weeks, it was also affected, and showings literally were down quite a bit. So our local market had that big decline, as you can see, right? And so that was pretty much our end of March and into early April experience of sheltering in place and what's happening. So even during that time, there were, homes selling and so forth, but the activity dropped a lot. So this is a depiction of how we were severely declining March 31st, April 1st, April 7th. Things started to kind of stabilize, right? And then once we got into like early April, people started realizing that this was kind of like a new norm that we were in, right? So for lack of a better word, it was the new norm. And then we started seeing a distinct uptick come April 13th. And the market is on a definite incline right now compared to where it was. We're not to a normal and typical spring market, but the trajectory that we're on is very positive with regards to showings and buyers willing to get out and go look at homes, although the inventory is really low in our area. So there's some other factors affecting our real estate market. So we're going to talk quickly about the employment market. And there's some really interesting things to know about that, because there's supply and demand with houses, buyers buying, sellers selling, all of that stuff, but then they have to be able to get loans, right? And sometimes people don't realize or don't understand, because it's not their job, it's ours, to know how the employment market, how the labor market, how all that stuff is affecting the real estate market. In December of 2019, you can read this, that the U.S. jobless rate, you guys, was at a 50-year low. That's incredible. That means in 1969, which is when I was born, 50 years ago was the lowest unemployment rate. Hence, that's where we were right before going into this pandemic, right? So we were strong real estate-wise, we were strong employment-wise, and then all of this happened, right? So basically, the real unemployment rate soared past 20% from March 12th to end of April. And what that means is that in that time frame, in that 5 weeks, you guys, there were over 26,500 jobs lost, either furloughed or laid off or fired or whatever glamorous word you want to use, but there were 26,500 people that are not working currently, over and above what was off at the beginning of March. So at the beginning of March, there were 7,100,000 people out of work. That's what made the lowest unemployment rate of around 3.5%, something like that. To right now, we are at 20.6% unemployment. So the next statistics are pretty staggering of how that relates to all of the stuff that we've read in our history books and that some of us experienced with the Great Recession in 2008. And the number in the Great Recession, there were 15 million people that were unemployed. And those were some really, really, really hard times. There wasn't a sector of the economy that wasn't affected then. However, people say, yeah, well, there's 33 million now, that's double. It's not. We have a lot more people in the United States, but statistically, like percentage-wise, 20% of the population was unemployed during the Great Depression, and there's now 20.6% of our population unemployed. So those are some pretty staggering numbers and something to really pay attention to, because that, depending upon how long this goes, could affect everything that's going on in the world, let alone just the real estate market. And then during the 2008 recession, in that time frame, there were 15.3 million people out of work. So again, if any of you experienced that, those were some pretty crappy times. Obviously, I wasn't alive in the Great Depression. However, I was alive and kicking during the Great Recession, and those times weren't easy for a lot of people. And right now, we are, more than double that, which is kind of crazy. What industries have been most affected? And this is pretty staggering as well. Over 36% of the leisure and hospitality industry folks are out of work. As you guys know, we can't go out to restaurants, we can't go to bars, we can't go hang out at like our local Airbnb or Airbnb or go to hotels. That's been dramatically affected the most. The second most affected industry has been healthcare and social services. And when I was doing the research, I was kind of surprised because, you think about healthcare, it's like, well, with all this pandemic going on, that should be a booming business. Well, I didn't take into consideration like dental offices, other physicians' offices that aren't dealing with the coronavirus, that are, specialists like therapists or physical therapy or, pain medicine or whatever the case may be. And then obviously daycares. Professional services, such as temporary help services like the manpowers and all that kind of stuff, and travel services, and then retail trade. So clothing and accessory stores have been shut down. I guess they don't consider clothing and accessories an essential item. We have to wear what we have unless we shop on Amazon like I do. But Target and Walmart and all those places are open, and that's because they serve food, right? So that's why they're so open and they're essential. But sporting goods stores are closed, bookstores are closed. My team and I did a really cool exercise on Saturday about doing our dream boards, setting our goals for the future. And when we realized halfway through the week, we were all excited about it, that we couldn't go get magazines to cut out our dreams, we were like, oh, heck, what are we going to do? But anyway, we improvised and we just cut stuff out of the internet. So it was kind of fun. But, I didn't think about Barnes & Noble being closed, right? So what's the government done? Let's go into that really quick. What did they try to do to impact this freight train moving really, really well and oiled to automatic sudden stop with 26.5 million, actually 33 million people out of work? Well, they came up with the stimulus plan, which is $2.2 trillion, as you can see on the screen. Part of that was the PPP, which was the payroll protection program, right? Well, you guys have all heard in the news. And again, these are just, I'm not trying to out anybody or anything. These are just facts, right? You've heard them all. Not judging or whatever, but the PPP was designed to be small business association loans that could be forgivable if they were used a certain way to protect jobs and keep people employed, right? And that ran out quickly, like almost as quickly as it was implemented, it was gone, you know? So there were unfortunately some large companies. I just heard today, and I didn't know this, that the LA Lakers got some money, Ruth Chris, Shake Shack, but luckily they've all or almost all of them have returned that money. And so hopefully that's going to be available to the people who really need it, which is the small business associations, to try to help put people back to work. Recently, they just announced a new, as of this last week, a $320 billion addition to the $2.2 trillion, specifically and hopefully for the small businesses out there. Individually, I think you guys have all heard that individuals are supposed to receive $1,200 per person to help stimuli or to create more stimulus in the economy. That, however, though, is not for everybody. They capped the $1,200 per person at people that, as an individual, were making $75,000 or less, and as a joint tax return was $150,000 or less. So each person would get $1,200 then. And if you do have children that are 16 years old or less, which I thought was quite interesting because I always thought you were considered a minor or a child until you were 18, but the stimulus package stops at age 16. So if you have children that are 16 or under, you were supposed to get $500 for each one of those children. It's still coming out. It's still slowly going into places. But again, we have to give some slack because this has been a reactionary program. Because again, even though if people knew about it in, you know, last January or this January or March 1st, it doesn't really matter. It wasn't something that we as a country were prepared for, and they're just trying to react and help the people as best as they can. So then unemployment, that's been kind of another fiasco where it's much easier, it's my understanding, to get it right now, but I know a lot of people who have received it and some who haven't received their checks yet. And then once they calculate that, you're supposed to be getting an extra $600 a week. So what that means is if you haven't received it, I was just made aware that whenever you do start receiving it, they will pay you for the back pay based upon when you actually filed and so forth. So verify that with the government just to make sure, but that's what I was told by a couple different people who've received that. So the next segment I want to talk about that affects the real estate market is we've had the local market. Where were we? We've had the employment market. Now we're in the mortgage market. So we learned a lot from the country crash, and they learned a lot from the country crash in 2008, right? So there's two tactics for people who already have mortgages. There's forbearance and deferment. And I want to talk about those because there is a difference in those tactics of relief from your current mortgage payments. So both allow mortgage payments to be skipped for a set period of time. Depending upon the lender, there can be some subtle differences, right? But the biggest difference for forbearance as opposed to deferment is basically what happens at the end of that period. So forbearance is a lump sum payment of the amounts missed due in full at the end of the period, and a deferment is repay over time or added to the end of the loan by extending the period, etc. So the forbearance is interesting because say your house payment is $1,000 a month, right? And they give you 4 months or 3 months to defer or to be in forbearance. Well, your income obviously has been decreased or you wouldn't apply for a forbearance. So at the end of that 3 or 4 months, how are you going to have that full amount that they want due in one lump sum period, right? Deferment, on the other hand, they can extend it to the end of the loan. It's kind of like you hear car companies all the time saying no payments for 90 days. Like they did this back when the economy was crappy before, and you know nothing's for free. So basically, even though they say no payments for 90 days, well, that is carried on to the end of the loan or spread out over the life of the loan or something like that, so that they get what they're due, but it's just in smaller increments. Really important notes to consider if you do have a mortgage and you are considering a forbearance or a deferment is it used to impact your credit. Don't take for granted right now because there have been a lot of loopholes right now, so to speak, with regards to some hall passes that the government's giving us, like the unemployment. You don't have to go out and search for a job right now. They just, you know, you can just collect the checks because, you know, 20+% of our country is unemployed. So probably not a lot of people are hiring. Who knows? I don't know. But anyway, it used to impact the credit. It could impact the credit. So don't take it for granted that it won't impact your credit. It could involve a new loan or rewriting of your current loan to some extent. And you guys, nothing is free. So keep that in mind. Just because you're not paying a payment doesn't mean that the interest during those months you're not paying the payment isn't accruing on the interest that's already due, right? So just pay attention to that as well. And it is temporary. It's for a few months at most. Like, this is not a new lifestyle. This isn't, we can take this on for 6 months or a year or what have you. They did do a stay in the foreclosures of people who are already headed down that track. They did do that, as well as evictions from people that have already been foreclosed upon. And that was something that was passed as well. But don't make, if you can pay your mortgage, basically pay your mortgage, right? Don't make this like a new lifestyle. And please don't stop just paying your mortgage unless you communicate with your lender and get everything in writing. Like, make sure you're extremely specific and you know exactly what your new situation is. And, you know, if you're on the phone with them, I would even encourage tape recording the call. I'm not 100% sure on this, but it's the research I've done says that in the state of Ohio anyway, if one party knows that it's being recorded, it's valid. So even if it's not, record it just to make sure you understand it and that you've got some sort of documentation. And also notice that if you escrow for your taxes and insurance, you may have to pay your taxes and insurance separately, even though your mortgage, your principal and interest have been, you know, deferred or forbeared or whatever. So just pay attention to those details and ask those questions if that's the route you need to go. So how is the COVID-19 impacting mortgage availability? That's another whole, you know, ball of wax, so to speak. So mid-April, the mortgage credit availability was at a 5-year low, right? So we've been on this 4 or 5 year high. Everything's been awesome. Credit's easy to get again. Conventional index of mortgages dropped 24% by mid-April. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac had only dropped about 2.7, but these were statistics as of last week. I'm pretty sure, based upon what I'm about to share with you next, that that number is going to be huge for the end of April. And jumbo loans had almost a 37% decline in mortgage availability. Well, what does that mean? Mortgage availability is the willingness of a lender to give you money, right? And under certain criteria. So FHA, as a government figure, has basically kept their credit score that you have to have a 580 and a minimum of 3.5% down for them to insure the loan. However, most lenders out there have increased that dramatically, right? When this first happened, we had just put one of our listings under contract with an FHA buyer from another agent. And within 3 to 4 days after this happening, they were already pre-qualified. We had the letter. However, the lender kind of rescinded that and said, hey, we're no longer going to do your loan because your credit score is X and we've raised our criteria to 680, right? Well, 680, you guys, is conventional guidelines. So luckily, we were able to switch that around. The buyer wanted the house enough that we just send them with a lender that had not changed their guidelines yet. But we did get a call from our bank, one of the banks that we prefer to use, and it within about a week or so, and they were saying, hey, everybody we have in your pre-approval line right now is okay, but everybody from this day forward needs this criteria. And Chase Bank and other banks have followed suit. They raised their minimum across the board to 700. So you guys can Google all of this. There's very few people in the United States that have a 700 credit score or above. So that decreases the availability of, or the ability to, for a borrower to get a mortgage. So jumbo loans, they've increased their conforming guidelines, meaning that a jumbo loan is anything that's above, the loan is above $510,400 for most of the US, right? What happens there is say you buy an $800,000 house, you have $100,000 in down payment. Between the maximum loan that you can get conventionally, which is $510,400, and the purchase price and your down payment, there's about a $190,000 gap, right? Well, how do you come up with that gap? That's where the jumbo loans come in. They are sold on the secondary market. They're backed by securities. And the securities market right now, if you follow any of that, is wildly volatile. So that's why you can see it drop like 37%. So anyway, minimum credit score is 700, and you have to have a minimum of 20% down. Conventional loans, this, you guys, is probably what's going to save us through this whole factor, are people that have a minimum credit score of 620. And again, most lenders have increased that to 680 or a little bit higher. If you have a 740 credit score, that's where you get the absolute best rates. Excuse me. And still, it's a minimum down payment of 300, or I'm sorry, 3%. Loan terms can be 15 or 20 years. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. And you can buy primary or secondary houses. So people ask all the time, who's buying right now in these markets? Like, who really is going to be out wearing masks and doing all this stuff and buying homes? Well, in every market, you guys, there's always been buyers buy and sellers sell, even when we had the Great Depression, the Great Recession, all of that above. So who's buying? People are always downsizing. You know, sometimes houses are just too big. Like, you grow out of, or the big mansion that was bought 10 or 15 years ago is now just too much house to take care of. Seniors, you know, this is an aging population, and seniors are always having to downsize regardless what the market is. They're either going to a smaller house that they can manage, or they're going to an assisted living or independent living or something like that. People are always upsizing. You've heard him joke about coming out of this pandemic, there's going to be a lot of divorces and a lot of babies, you know? So people are going to be upsizing into bigger houses because all of a sudden their 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with 5 kids is kind of tight, you know? Fortunately, people are always getting married as well as divorced, and they're combining families. So there's different things that happen. There's job transfers, there's military transfers. It's what I call experiential movers. Like, there's been an event in someone's life that causes them to make the move, not like, oh, the market's good, we've got a lot of equity, let's go buy another house, right? It's not kind of like that anymore. So what are the pros and cons of selling right now during the COVID-19? Well, as I shared with you in the beginning, we're on the uptick for showings, so there is still a pent-up buyer demand, and I'm not kidding about that. There's definitely a pent-up buyer demand. And as a seller, there are people that are still, you know, hunkering down and staying in place, understandably and obviously. So there's less market competition for your home. There's not 5 houses on your street available right now. There could be yours and maybe one other. It gives you maybe a stronger ability to negotiate because there is less competition. And right now, there's no more qualified or higher motivated buyers than in this time frame, right? 1, they have to have better credit. 2, they're taking, you know, risk and all of that kind of stuff, and they really have to have a need and a want. You're going to have far less showings. Around December, we had one of our properties on the market. We took it on right before Christmas. We even had showings on Christmas Day, and we had 17 showings between like Christmas Eve and the end of the weekend. What we're seeing right now is houses are getting between 2 to 6 showings on them before they're under contract, right? And so you have far less showings, far less traffic coming through your home. And the other kind of cool thing is, because of the shelter in place, a lot of lenders have gone to no appraisals, or no appraisals. They can do them like 6 months after the loan closes. Now, this isn't for all types of mortgages. This is just certain lenders that have done that. So right before this happened, I personally started refinancing my house and my rental properties. And we're getting ready to close those this week, fortunately, and they didn't do any appraisals for my personal property or any of my rentals. So they do what's called desktop underwriting, which they kind of just look in the area and make sure the value's kind of sort of supported, or they don't do any appraisal at all and push it off for maybe 6 months or maybe never. So what are the cons? The cons are, obviously, you have to be safe. You want your family to be safe. You want the buyers coming through your home and the agents coming through your home to be safe. So you have to sanitize your house at a deeper level than what you probably ever have had to in the past. And extended time frames to close and inspect. So although there's not as much going on, there's something that seems like it happens almost every day to change the way we were doing business last week. And, you know, so it may take longer to get an inspection or to get a closing, and people are working from home, you know? So there's that efficiency factor, you know, not everybody that works from home can be as efficient because they have more distractions during their workday. For buyers, what are some of the pros for buyers? Well, kind of the same for sellers, you know, is there's less competition for houses. So although there may be less homes on the market, the cool thing is, instead of trying to beat out 15 other buyers, you only have 2 to 4 or 5 maybe to beat out, or maybe none at all, you know? So there is less competition because there's not as many buyers out there looking right now. So you may get better terms, you may get a better price, and I don't have to tell you all, hopefully, but interest rates are wildly low. Like we're around 3.5%, depends on the day, right? But they may even go lower. I've heard rumors that they may even go to 2.75% to 2.5%, which literally, you guys, is absolutely almost free money. And you could get some discounted typical moving services. Like, although people have to make money, there's not as much going on right now, and a lot of people they count on this spring and summer season for the majority of their yearly income. You know, it's kind of like Christmas tree farms at Christmas. They know that they're not going to be doing any business in July, so they need to do all their money between, like, I don't know, October and January or whatever. So same thing with the moving industry. Cons are reduced buying power potentially. Like, say you were pre-qualified for a loan of X, and one or the other or both parties get laid off or furloughed or fired completely, and there goes the income, right? So say you qualified for a $300,000 house, and one of the parties got, a reduction in income, and now you may only qualify for a $225,000 house if you're on one income, or whatever the example. You get my point. It could be, again, a potentially less efficient process. We've talked about that, and extended time frames to inspect or close. So none of the cons, in my opinion, for a buying situation or a selling situation are that dramatic, that outweigh, that outweigh the pros. They just don't do it, but that's up to somebody to decide. So what have we had to do? Like, what real estate innovations have had to come into play? Which is really cool because, every market brings some different aspects to, the real estate industry, and there's always positives that come out of everything, right? So the faster that a real estate agent adopts the change, or a real estate company adapts to the new norm, the better they're going to be able to survive and to thrive and to efficiently and competently, more importantly, and safely take care of their buyers and their sellers, right? So we've had some absolute pivots and changes. And, I've said for years, because my business coach told me, 20 years ago, that Mark Twain said that when the world comes to an end, he wants to be in Cincinnati because Cincinnati's 20 years behind the times, right? Well, Dayton's at least that far behind. And things happen on the coast first. So in resort markets in California and Florida and New Jersey and New York and all these places, this stuff has been going on for years. We just haven't had it in Ohio. We have, because we're in a military market, and we've sold properties to buyers that have never seen the home or the house until they have actually physically moved in. We do things through virtual showings, through doing video for inspections. We can do FaceTime. We can do so many different things that a buyer can actually go through the property without stepping foot into it, right? So it's safer, it's easier, and for sellers, the buyers have already at least seen it once, and so when they're coming through the second time that they're pretty interested. So here's a couple of examples of ways that we're able to show a buyer a property, and it's kind of cool because you can go up, you can go down, you follow those little green things, and it shows them the front garden, shows them that area. You take it through. You can look down. You can check out the slate. You can go through the front door. Once you go in the front door, you can kind of see how it all lays out. So you can kind of get the idea how you can spin around, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, how a buyer can really see the quality of the finishes in the property as well as the layout and overview. So that's one of the ways that we can show a buyer a home without them ever stepping in the property, right? So we also do virtual listing appointments. I've sold many homes over the years that I've never even seen, nor have I met the clients, because I've worked personally with a lot of expired listings, and sometimes they're gone, and that means they've hired another agent who didn't sell it. They've already moved to Tennessee or Florida or wherever. So we meet over the phone, over the air, and this is kind of how we do that. So let me show you that quickly.
So here's an example of once we did all the pre-qualification and so forth, when we talk to our clients on the phone, this is how we can actually present online. So you can see over here, you've got me and the potential client. That's Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
But the cool thing about it is you can see body language, you can ask questions, all that kind of stuff. And when we go to the market evaluation, it's very simple. And actually, when we present in person, it's kind of cool. Here's one I did today. It's kind of cool, but I present using my iPad. And honestly, being on your computer, you can see the active, pending, and sold listings. You can see the pictures even more clear. Sarah, how does that look to you?
Super clear and crisp, yeah.
And as you go through the relevant properties, we can walk you through them. We can do.
So you guys can see hopefully from, you know, and that's just a beginning sample of things that we can do. Again, you can walk a buyer through a property doing FaceTime. You can walk a buyer through the property doing a live Facebook Live. You can do a Zoom meeting. There's just so many different ways that you can show properties. We do live stream open houses. There's just a lot of cool things out there that are going to change the face of the way real estate was done. So that brings me to this funny thing is back in, this is 1989, you guys see this? This is an MLS sales book. So in 2001, they stopped using these. I started selling in 89. We got to sell properties from these lovely little 2x2, looks like the MLS, right? The one I just showed you? But they were black and white, you know, 2x2, 4x4, whatever, pieces of paper. Well, in 2001, they got rid of these books and they went to the internet. And that way the public had access to what was our proprietary information, right? And the agents were freaking out. They're like, oh my God, like, you know, they've got our information. They don't need us anymore. Well, that's just not true, right? So real estate is a person-to-person. You need an experience. Like, you could also go defend yourself in a court of law, but would you for something that important? So this is just like that, you know? So there's going to be some awesome things, some more efficient ways to show properties, ways that sellers have more qualified buyers going through their front door, and it's going to become more of an accepted norm. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of these are just some of the tools that we use. You can sign contracts online legally. You can do so many different things that we couldn't do before or that weren't the norm before, even though we've been doing them, for everyone to still effectively buy and sell real estate now and into the future. This is just an example of one of our clients who was considered an at-risk client due to her age and some illness. And she naturally had some concerns about selling her home. And we had it on the market last year. She had some things, we had to take it off. But yet she is one of those experiential clients. She had a new home under contract that's closing mid-May. And so she didn't have a choice. They didn't have pandemic clauses in purchase contracts 6 months ago or 9 months ago, or in a lot of contracts. I would venture to say that there's going to be a lot of changes to the way business is done with signing contracts, whether it's to buy a widget or a house. But anyway, this one client, she was one of those experiential buyers. We made sure that we had separate showings. We made sure that we only had showings at a certain amount of times, no overlapping. There were just a lot of different things that we did to protect her and protect the buyers and get the property sold. So there are ways that you can make it happen in any type of market out there, no different than what's going right now with COVID-19. So that is all I have for you. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. Or if you would like to ask me a question out loud, you know, just raise your hand. I'm happy to help. And I'm here for you, you guys. So whether you're looking to buy or sell now or 2 years from now, you just have a quick question, or you just want some deeper information or just somebody to talk to, you know, here is a way that you can get into my contract or my calendar. Just set up a time with me to have that conversation, and I'm more than happy to help however I can. I appreciate every single one of you. I appreciate your time this evening. I hope it's been valuable for you. And out of respect, I said we'd keep it to 30 or 40 minutes, and we're at 39 and a half. So you know how to reach me. If you need me, please do so. Otherwise, you will be receiving a replay of this. Share it with whomever you'd like, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.